Manny Man Does History. The politics of 19th century Europe were messy. What's changed? It consisted of various empires spreading across and conquering the world for resources, trying to prove to each other which was the biggest power. The German Reich was only a relatively newer empire compared to its neighbours. Before the unification of Germany in 1871, the Germanies were a complex series of kingdoms, grand duchies, principalities, free Hanseatic cities, and one imperial territory. In the past, they had been unified by the Holy Roman Empire, which was dissolved by Napoleon Bonaparte. Throughout the 19th century, the idea of a unified Germany united by common language and culture grew and eventually became a reality, controlled from Berlin in Prussia. Germany became an extremely technologically advanced nation very quickly. The early 20th century saw many alliances and rivalries forming between these countries. Germany began building its navy to match the British, so the Brits built even more ships. Germany fell out with France in 1905 when Germany supported the Sultan of French-controlled Morocco against France. Austria-Hungary had taken Bosnia-Herzegovina from the Ottoman Empire, holding it as a protectorate for years, but when they officially annexed it in 1908, it annoyed the Serbs, the Russians and the Italians. In 1911, Italy and the Ottoman Empire went to war in North Africa, creating more tensions. The Balkan Wars saw 4 Balkan states fight the Ottomans back, creating a rise in unity amongst the South Slavic peoples. Things in Europe were tense, and the former Chancellor of the German Reich, Otto von Bismarck, had warned Kaiser Wilhelm back in 1897 that one day the great European war will come out of some damn foolish thing in the Balkans. The empires each built up alliances and massive armies to stave off war, believing that everyone else would be too scared to fight against them. At least that was the theory. Things all changed when a gang of Yugoslav nationalists who didn't like being part of Austria-Hungary shot the Austro-Hungarian Archduke Franz Ferdinand while he was in Sarajevo. Swiftly, the Austro-Hungarian Empire declared war on Serbia, so Russia came in to aid Serbia. So Germany declared war on Russia. Knowing that France would declare war on Germany, Germany decided to invade France via neutral Belgium and Luxembourg, and because of this, Great Britain stepped in to stop the Germans getting any closer. It was a mess of allegiances and rivalries with two sides forming, the Allies or Entente and the Central Powers. And so began what became known at the time as the Great War. The war to end all wars. And it was not so great. A new form of warfare evolved as these fully industrialized armies with engines, machine guns, aeroplanes, and new chemical gas weapons fought against each other. It was the dawn of modern warfare. At the time, national pride was at an all-time high, and men were proud to go off and fight for their country. It was seen as a romantic idea to go off and be a hero. Boys as young as 12 managed to lie their way into the army ranks, only to discover that it was not such a sweet and honourable thing to die for one's country. Germany marched on Paris, but was stopped by the French, and both sides dug themselves into trenches in what became known as the Western Front. On the Eastern Front, the Russians invaded Austria-Hungary, but were stopped in Eastern Prussia by the Germans. The European colonies across the world went to war with each other, such as British New Zealand occupying German Samoa, French and British troops invading German Togoland and Cameroon. Because of German presence in the Pacific, Japan declared war on Germany and Austria-Hungary. The Ottoman Empire joined in on the side of the Central Powers in late 1914. More and more nations from all over the world joined the fight as it spread across Europe. Because of the nature of overseas colonies, many countries were brought into the war simply because they were part of the empire, despite the fight being focused in Europe and concerned European leaders. Great support came from India, hoping it would help further Indian home rule. An interesting thing to note is that King George V of England and Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany were first cousins, sharing Queen Victoria as a grandmother. Tsar Nicholas II of Russia was first cousin of George on the other side, and he was a third cousin of Wilhelm. And indeed, Nicholas was married to another first cousin of George and Wilhelm. It was essentially a massive royal family feud. Trench warfare was quite terrible. Each army would dig a long system of trenches in the ground, fortifying the front with barbed wire and sandbags. It was a long stalemate where neither side dare advance on the other. Machine guns were a new and very effective weapon. When the time was right, the army would climb up over the top and charge across no man's land to the enemy trench and capture it, thus gaining more land and taking another step towards their goal. At least that was the plan. Spirits were high, at least, when the first Christmas came by. Along the Western Front, both forces climbed out of their trenches to celebrate Christmas together, talk, share stories, and play football. When Christmas ended, they would climb back into their trenches to become enemies once again. Conditions in the trenches were dreadful. Soldiers in France and Belgium found their feet rotting away from the constant damp. In contrast, Australian, New Zealand and other British and Ottoman soldiers in Gallipoli had blisteringly hot trenches where rain and cold was replaced with dehydration and overheating. Disease was everywhere in the trenches. 1916 saw a renewed push on the Western Front from both sides. Thousands of French died at Verdun as the Germans unleashed their chlorine gas. In Ireland, Irish nationalists staged an uprising in Dublin in the hope to catch Britain while they were distracted by the war. The rebellion was crushed by Britain, but after executing the rebel leaders, Irish support for Britain and the war dropped, at least in the south of Ireland. Most Irish troops after that came from the Protestant north. The infamous Battle of the Somme was a long and gruelling battle that lasted from July to November. The first day alone saw over 80,000 men wounded or killed, mostly British, due to disastrous attacks. Fundamental errors and contradictions from the High Command led to confusion and unclear plans. In places, soldiers weren't organised in time to charge, so by the time they got going, the artillery had stopped on the Germans, allowing the Germans to easily fire upon their attackers. Planes and artillery were supposed to clear the German barbed wire in no man's land, but the shrapnel was ineffective against the wire. When the order came to go over the top, thousands of men ran out to their death to be caught on the barbed wire and picked off one by the German machine guns. This battle saw the first use of tanks by the British. Ultimately, France and Britain pushed against Germany and gained much ground. By Christmas 1916, no man wanted good cheer wished upon their faceless enemy. On the sea, Britain mined many patches of international water to stop movement of German ships. Germany was blockaded. After many naval battles, Britain stayed in control of the seas, above the water at least. Germany were on the attack with their U-boat submarines, adding a new dimension to naval warfare. They could attack without warning. They sank many ships, including the Lusitania in 1915, and because this broke loads of war rules, it ultimately influenced the United States of America to enter the war, 2 years after the Lusitania sank. The British pushed up through the Arabian Peninsula with T.E. Lawrence, aka Lawrence of Arabia, helping to organise the Arab Revolt against the Ottoman Empire. During the war, the Turks systematically exterminated up to 1.5 million Armenians within the Ottoman Empire. In 1917, the Russians had a series of revolutions. In the February Revolution, the Tsars were gotten rid of, but Russia remained in the war. But in the October Revolution, the Bolsheviks took control and brought power to the people and sowed the seeds for communism in Russia. The Russians signed a treaty with Germany and pulled out of the war, causing an initial difficulty for the enemies of Germany and Austria-Hungary. The Allies, however, quickly became refreshed with the reinforcements from the United States of America, who eventually decided to enter the war in 1917, after Germany tried to convince Mexico to attack the US. Germany made a fierce and effective push before the Allies could use their advantage. However, American troops continued to arrive in such great numbers that Germany's army couldn't last any longer. The Allies pushed up from Italy, the Balkans, and the Middle East, putting Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire out of the war. As the Allies advanced the Western Front, German Kaiser Wilhelm faced pressure from his own people, and he abdicated. Germany would become the Weimar Republic. Germany called for an armistice to stop the fighting, bringing victory to the Allies and an end to the war. The fighting stopped on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918. It took 6 months to negotiate terms, and it was ultimately decided that the Central Powers were to pay for the damages they had caused during the war. Germany only fully paid off this debt in 2010. The map of Europe was redrawn and German territory shrank. It was in the aftermath of the collapse of the Ottoman Empire and the Arab Revolution that Britain would establish the state of Palestine and the French would establish the states of Syria and Lebanon, among other Middle Eastern states. Soldiers who made it home again were changed men. They were haunted by the horrors which they had seen in the trenches. Gas attacks, friends dying by their side, the constant shelling of enemy artillery, the haunting whistle calling to go over the top. They were shell-shocked and found it impossible to go back to normal life after the trenches. Many great poets and writers were inspired by their hell in the trenches, such as Wilfred Owen, J.R.R. Tolkien, and Ernest Hemingway of the so-called Lost Generation. Some survived, many did not. To add insult to injury, the Spanish flu pandemic, which spread across the world towards the end and after the war, killed more people across the world than the Great War itself. The world was a changed place after the war. People had seen what death and destruction could be dealt by mankind. The men who left to become heroes came back scarred, or worse, never returned at all. The poppy is used to remember the millions who died in this war, as it was just about the only flower to grow in the carnage-ridden wasteland between the trenches. The world was now a darker place. The League of Nations was set up so no countries could fall out with each other ever again. People hoped that it would indeed be the war to end all wars. Unfortunately, they were mistaken. Ba-bum.